Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Living Room Studio. I am your man out of Japan, Jay Contra, and we are here with the 6K subscriber Q&A. Thank you to everyone who filled out the survey. A lot of great feedback. Really got some new good ideas for videos and systems that I want to cover. And people were helpful enough to include some questions for this Q&A. So let's begin. It's going to be a mix of sort of personal questions along with just general Japanese game collecting questions. So first, do you have plans to make some retro hunt videos outside of Japan? Yes, I do. I have recently been going to a British retailer called Kex, which is sort of like a British book off, I guess, where they have a combination of like retro games and modern games. It's all used stuff. So I've already gotten some footage from there. They'll be coming out eventually. Next question. Let's see. Is there a possibility that you can get repros in a Japanese game shop? And if yes, how can you identify these repros? So Japanese game shops recently, I would say within the last couple of years, have actually started stocking official reproductions. A couple of years ago, one of the more expensive Super Famicom games, Iron Commando, had an official reprint. Now, the reproduction cartridge is very distinct. Like, I think the color's different, the label's different slightly. So they do have actual legitimate reproductions at these stores. Now, as for counterfeit games, I remember I got a bit of heat for saying that it is entirely possible to find a counterfeit game at a Japanese store simply because a shop might not have the expertise in order to identify a very expensive game, because you can go on Alibaba and you can find some very good, almost indistinguishable reproduction games. Like, for example, like Summer Carnival 92 Rekka. You really have to know what counterfeiters commonly get wrong in order to identify one of these games. Now, a place like Mandarake, they will very often, I've noticed on their web store, they have the boards. They will have pictures. They will open up the cartridge and show the board in their pictures. Places like Surugaya will not, and I don't know. I've never asked. So I don't know if they will let you open up a game, or if they will open it up themselves in order for you to actually check the board. But the expertise is there, like at a place like Mandarake, probably Trader, friends to a certain extent. But look, nobody's perfect. So it is entirely possible for it to happen, I believe. I think you're much less likely for it to happen in Japan as compared to somewhere outside of Japan. But that's always going to be a risk you take, no matter if you're buying it off of eBay, buying it at a Japanese online seller, or you're doing it in person in Japan. Buying a counterfeit game is always going to be a risk. And I think if you're not Japanese yourself, or you don't have a huge exposure to Japanese video games, the knowledge just simply is not out there on how to identify these fake games, even in Japanese, where there is some limited information. But in English, there's almost no information on how to identify counterfeits of these games. So when you ask, how do you identify these, like, I can tell you how to look at a record cartridge and say if it's fake or not. But for a lot of games, it's very, very difficult to distinguish. And a lot of these games, you don't have an original example. So it can be tough to identify those. Next question. What kind of genre of video games do I particularly like? Well, I kind of like a mix of everything. I don't think I like puzzle games that much because I'm not very good at puzzle games. What I like specifically is I probably like strategy games. I would say the most. Like, I'd say probably like Total War, both turn-based and real-time strategy games. Like, I'm really big into like tactics games like Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics and Ogre Battle. But I'd say probably top, it's really tough to say if I like real-time strategy like StarCraft or like Total War more, but definitely like that, especially like historical strategy, like Crusader Kings, Europa Universalis. Huge fans of those. Those are probably the games that I've sunk the most hours into. Like the game I've probably played the most in my life is Empire Total War. I think I've spent like no joke, like 250 hours on that game. I played it a lot back in college. Question the next. When should someone stop collecting old consoles and games? I guess the sort of the simple answer is just when it's not fun anymore. Like when I think of when I completed my N64 collection, I think by the time there was like 4 or 5 games left to complete the set, I was just like, I hate the N64. This is stupid. But it's like it was 5 games, and it's not like they were super expensive games. So I was like, why not? Recently, I will say that I haven't been collecting games recently, not only because I don't have a job, but also because I just have so many games that if I were to buy a game now, it would just go on this huge, massive pile. And maybe, if you're the kind of person that, you've got the money and you can spend it and it's more of actually possessing the game, that's fine. You just, you want to have it. Like, hey, that's fine. But I think for me, I'm just like, I've got so many games that I need to play that I've stopped collecting. I don't see myself stopping permanently, of course, but I'm definitely not going to collect for probably the next, I think my current plan is for the next year and a half, probably. But obviously don't go into debt, buying these old games. Don't buy, honestly, I'd say my general wisdom being now that I'm in my 30s, and I guess I have some wisdom, is don't buy stuff that you're not going to play. Like, unless it's something that is really important, like maybe, one of the things that I've always maybe thought about getting is like a sealed copy of Majora's Mask, simply because Majora's Mask is my favorite game of all time. So I would love to just have like an unopened copy just to have. But I'd say in general, don't buy it if you're not going to play it. or don't buy it if you're not going to play it soon. If you buy it thinking, oh, I'll play this a year from now, maybe you should wait. Next question. Looking back at your time in Japan, were there any rare/expensive games that you passed up on that you wished you had purchased now? I'd say probably the only game that I regret not buying was a copy of Aria of Sorrow for the Game Boy Advance, the final Castlevania game that came out for the Game Boy Advance. Simply because I found a cheap-ish copy. Normally it's like $200. I found a copy that was like $100, and I probably should have bought it simply because there was another Castlevania game, Castlevania Vampire Killer, that is normally like $700. I found it for $400 with friends, but I'm like, no, I don't want to spend $400 on a single game. I will spend $100 on a Castlevania. I don't think I'll spend $400 on a Castlevania. Other than that, maybe some more GameCube games. That would have been nice. Excuse me. Next question. Did you ever get into trouble when buying games in Japan? I've almost had the police called on me when the clerk accidentally gave me back too much change on a Super Metroid in Mulan and Akihabara. When I heard the word keisatsu, I knew stuff got real. No, no, I've never. That's so weird. Like I've never actually been to Mulan. I can't believe I only heard about Mulan after I left Japan. Like, it's so weird that it just didn't come up on my radar. Yeah, it's so weird that if they made it, it's on them if they gave you too much change. Like, you're not stealing from them if they gave you too much change. That is so weird. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know, maybe you misheard them. It's entirely possible, but then, yeah, I don't know why they would do that. But if you're a foreigner in Japan, what are they gonna do? Next question. What equipment do you use to film your videos? Particularly interested also on how you filmed hands-free in your hard-off videos. So I'm filming, this video right now is being filmed on my iPhone. I think it's like the iPhone 11, whatever came out last year. That's the cheap version. That's what I use to film most of these vloggy sort of videos. I also use, for the hard-off videos, I used to use an E4K, which is like an action camera that was really cheap. I think it was like $100. I would always have my backpack on, and then I had this attachment where you mount the action camera onto a strap that goes onto the strap. And so I'd kind of like, it was very strange. Like it'd be so bizarre if you were like a Japanese person watching me in a hard off. I'd be like up against a showcase, just like moving the camera around in front of everything. It was so strange. In my videos, in my streams, I use just like some 720p Logitech webcam. And then for my capture cards, I have an old Elgato HD that I bought at this point, like maybe 7-8 years ago, that I use for all the retro streams. But that's my filming setup now. If I was going to change anything, I've actually more of the modern stuff, the videos that I've been filming in the last year have just been using my iPhone in order to do like when I went to a hard off and I would just capture footage. If I was just capturing footage and then I would do commentary later, I just use my iPhone for that. Next question. What do you think about continuing retro game hunting, but in the US, you have tons of flea markets and game stores? Yeah, when my visa runs out and I have to go back to the US, I'm definitely going to be, there's a couple of shops in the area where my parents live that I'll definitely be doing some filming in. Next question, and this is a big one. What is the best shop in Japan? Now, I will give the one that I think is absolutely the best, and then I'll give a couple of others that are like in their own special categories. I would say absolutely the best shop. The shop that I've had the best... Actually, no, now that I think about the best experience, it's probably Friends. Like, Friends in Akihabara is just... It's got selection, it's quiet, no one's in there that's bothering you and hassling you there. It's just very peaceful and very calm. They've got good deals, not always. I'd say second best is probably Trader, just because they've got the best deals, the best selection. The atmosphere is cool, but it's not quite Super Potato, where it's just like loud music blaring at you all the time, and then it's like packed with people and everything's overpriced, as opposed to say like Surugaya, which doesn't have that great of a selection, but everything's cheap, but it's also like really dark and kind of dingy, and it's just like, yeah. I would also say Mandarake might be even one of the best stores, just because it's definitely the store that I think takes the best care of its games. But yeah, definitely the best, absolutely, is probably, for my money, Friends. Yeah, Friends or Trader. It's kind of hard to say. Next question. How do you like it now that you are out of Japan with the whole COVID situation? I hope I haven't set off the YouTube alarms saying that in this current public health crisis. It's definitely been a big adjustment. It's so weird because it's not quite reverse culture shock since I'm not back in America yet, but getting used to, I think, yeah, being in Japan where people are just kind of largely like ignore you, and you know, you've got the shops that have all like the way you would pay for things is through a vending machine at a restaurant, or like they're having convenience stores that are open 24 hours. Whereas now I live in sort of a not quite suburban, but a very much smaller town in the UK, where the shop shuts at 4 o'clock on Sunday. So if it's like 6 o'clock and you want to buy something, you're out of luck. But it is also nice that the grocery stores, they stay open until 10. So that's pretty cool. Next question. How would you go about finding specific pieces of game merch / memorabilia in Japan in person? Are they easily located in shops next to the games in their own section, or strewn throughout? If I was looking for video game merchandise, the first place that I would go to is probably Mandarake. Because they have different floors that are devoted to different things. So you just go to the toy floor, and then they'll have like a video game section that is just video game toys. Otherwise, if you're like in Super Potato, they will have all of the merchandise sort of interspersed amongst all of the games. If I was looking for a specific item, like if I was say like, I don't know, if I wanted a Mega Man toy, for that, you're gonna have to know like who the manufacturer is. Like if it's something that's old, then that's when you have to go to Mandarake because they deal in all the old stuff. Whereas if it's new, then you might have to go to like Yodobashi Camera. That's really tough. I don't really have like yeah, like except from just going into the store and looking for it yourself, I don't really have a distinct answer for that. Next, how many games do you own? Are you close to completing any collections? Let's see. I think I own more than 1,000 games. I'm not actually completely sure. I have a massive spreadsheet that I have everything in it, but I haven't counted it up recently. The only complete collection that I have is a complete N64 collection. It's not complete. It's not complete in box. It's complete. It's a combination of complete in box games with cartridge games. Otherwise, I'm nowhere near close to completing any other collection. I think if I was going to go for another complete collection, it'd probably be GameCube games at this point, but I'm nowhere near close. Like I think there's like 300 GameCube games in Japan, but I'm not really working on that right now or anything else really. Next question. What is the best way besides eBay to buy Japanese video games? Depending on if you are a condition snob, then I would go with Mandarake because their website seems easy enough to use. Their listings have pictures of the actual game itself so that you know what you're buying is a thing that's in the pictures. If you don't care about condition, then go to Surugaya. They have an English website that I believe ships. It ships internationally. I don't know exactly where it ships to, but I don't have any personal experience in this yet, so I can't give you firsthand knowledge. I can only give you sort of what I am inferring of these websites, knowing how they operate back in Japan. Next question. What console are you most interested in right now / trying to collect for? I would say the console I'm most interested in right now is the Super Nintendo. I've been doing a lot of reviews and a lot of work on that, as well as a lot of streaming on that now here on YouTube. The system I think once I go back to America and I have actual physical access to it is I think going to be the GameCube. That's really I think where my nostalgia is right now. But I think definitely the Super Nintendo is I think where I'm like, yeah, this is the best system. But we'll see. It might be different in the next 6 months. So who knows? What's the Mahalo thing about? So it's kind of complicated because back when I was in high school and in college, I listened to a show called Loveline back in the United States. And one of the hosts, Adam Carolla, he would always end the show by saying, it was something along the lines of thanks and mahalo. And mahalo is Hawaiian for like thank you. So it was kind of like saying thanks and thank you at the same time. And so, because actually my dad's side of the family is from Hawaii. So I thought if I could steal that, at the time I admired Adam Carolla. Not so much anymore, but I thought that was sort of a way to tribute that to a show that I really love, and also to my family. So that's where Mahalo comes from. Next question, the all-important question for your Q&A. Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle? Charmander all the way. Back when I first started playing Pokemon, I used to choose Bulbasaur because that was easy mode. But now that I am a grown-up and true intellectual, it is Charmander, because then eventually you get Charizard, which is not I think Typhlosion is my favorite Pokemon, but definitely of the original Gen 1, Charmander all the way. Next question, what is your most prized piece in your collection? What is my most prized piece in my collection? Excuse me. I thought about this for a while, and I think when it comes down to it, it's probably going to be my translucent pink Hello Kitty Dreamcast, because it is just the most unique thing that I have. It is just absolutely crazy that something like that ever came out. I just like, if there was one thing, if like my collection was on fire, if it was in a burning building and I had to save one thing, like it's not even the most expensive thing that I have, but it's probably, I'd probably go in and save that. Just because, for one, I love the Dreamcast, and two, it is just the craziest thing that I have. That I think is really, even now, super hard to find. Next question. I heard that some places in Japan don't accept debit cards and only accept cash. Do the game stores in Akihabara accept debit cards? I would say by and large now the big ones definitely do. Like I'm pretty sure Trader does. Mandarake definitely has to, considering how freaking expensive its games are. Super Potato probably does. Again, I don't have personal experience in this because I paid for everything in cash. But I think the only place that I remember explicitly not accepting cards was Friends because they do everything in cash. And that's something that's pretty common even today in Japan is a lot of stores, like especially when it's run by older folks, which Friends definitely is these places only accept cash. It's pretty common, like restaurants, even some retail shops. But I'd say it's a lot different now in 2020. I think there are more places that accept cards now than they did in the past. Next question, which is a bit of a book and very philosophical. Why do some collectors rather spend money on $52 games? So like you have $100 and instead of buying one $100 game, you buy $52 games. Than just buying something that they really want to actually play for the same amount. Is it just the thrill of the deal? Why pad out a collection if you aren't going to play those games? You know, it is a good philosophical question, which is why buy 50 games when you can just buy one really good game? Well, I think in Japan's case, I think you can actually buy some pretty good games at $2. Maybe not at $2, but definitely like the $5 level. There's a lot of really good games at $5 that would cost more, like say in the United States or in Europe. But let's just say like 50 average games versus one really good game. Well, I think for some people, for one, that one really good game would only last like a couple of hours in certain cases. Maybe if it's an RPG, you get like 50 hours out of it. As opposed to the 50 average games where, you play each for a couple hours, you could maybe get more time. It's more of a time value, I think it is maybe is the reason why someone, and then I think there are some people who it's the volume of games that count. You want to fill up that shelf, and it's a lot harder to fill up that shelf with $100 games than it is with just a few, like with a bunch of with $52 games. So it's just people's philosophy on what it is to play games. Like my girlfriend George, she wants to complete games, and so if I had that mentality, I'm just gonna buy the $100 games because it's much easier. It's gonna be you're gonna complete those games a lot faster. Where if you have the 50 games, that might actually for me it might like weigh down on me if I felt like I had to complete those games instead of just play them for like an hour or two and then feel like I got my money's worth out of it. So I think it's just more of a value proposition, I think. Next question. Have you had experience returning games to Japanese retro shops? No. So a lot of, I know Hard Off has a certain guarantee period where it's like some games will have like a week or consoles might have a month where you can return it. I believe a bunch, like I think Mandarake, for example. I think Mandarake does not have a return policy. I think Trader has like a week return policy on it. But also like this is another thing where it's like if you're just visiting Japan, like you go out of Japan, you're not going to be able to return it. Whereas if you're living in Japan or if you're in Japan, you can test it out. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any experience with that. Next question. Do you think in most cases we are better off ordering import games online as opposed to planning a Japan trip around game hunting? Quick example, if you wanted to get a good deal on Street Fighter 03 on Saturn, complete, would you save money buying it at a local shop in Japan as opposed to $300 to $400 on eBay? Well, for one, I would say you should not plan a trip to Japan around buying video games. If you're going to go to Japan, like if you're going from America or Europe, you're going to be spending 14 hours on a flight that's going to cost anywhere from like $1,000 to $2,000. You're going to have paid all that money to have gone to Japan and just have bought video games. Where I think what you should be doing is if you have the time and the money to spend a week in Japan, spend one of those days hunting for video games and then spend the other 6 enjoying Japan. The food, the culture, the temples, the sights, and the other shopping too. Like, don't just go to Japan for shopping for video games. Japan has a lot of other cool things that you can buy, like if you're a man child like myself, the toys, the hobby goods, all that cool stuff. Do I think it's worth it? Say the other stuff is the icing on the cake, and yeah, you really just want that one day in Japan for buying games. Is it worth it? I'm gonna say probably, if it's just for the video games, if you don't care about the other stuff, I would say unless you're spending like if you're spending like $10,000 on games, probably not. Because I would say in general, yes, games are going to be a lot cheaper at Japanese stores like Trader and Surugaya than they will be on eBay. And I think I've done just some spot checking on some games. Like when I've seen an expensive game, I'll spot check it and see how much it is on eBay. But it's not going to be so much cheaper that it's going to be worth the $1,000 flight and the $75 to $100 a night hotel. Like, think about like your basic trip to Japan. If you're just going for let's just say it's a week. Let's just say 7 days. You're going to be spending $700 on the hotel, $1,000 on the flight, and then probably anywhere from $30 to $50 a day on food. So that ends up being what, $2,500 given incidentals. You're not going to be saving $2,500 on the price of these games unless you're talking about buying games over 5 years and you're spending a lot of money on games. If you're going to spend the $2,500 to go to Japan, you got to get more out of it than just buying video games. I cannot stress that enough. Okay, yeah, all right. So those are my words of wisdom on that. Yeah, might as well take this break to drink some water. Next question. About what percentage do hard-offs give you when you sell items to them? I think it's about 10%. I think I sold off some of my doubles to hard off just to get rid of them when I was moving in Japan. And I remember I think I sold them a spare copy of Final Fight 2. I think it's an $8 game, and they gave me $1. So I think in general it's about 10%. Although I don't, and that can depend. I think on if you're selling them something that's more modern, they'll give you something that's closer to the value because they want that stuff to churn quite quickly. Whereas with the retro stuff, it's just they'll just give you bargain bin prices on that. Next question: what kind of Switch games are you playing right now? I'm actually playing Bloodstained right now, which I actually kind of wish I bought the PS4 version, because the Switch version just has a lot of slowdown to it that's really can be really fatal, especially if you're fighting a boss. Otherwise, other games that I've been playing have been, I bought the Psycho collections, the shooting collections from the 90s. Those have been super fun. I recently just played through the Capcom the belt scrolling shooter collection, or the belt scrolling shooter, belt scrolling action game collection. That was really fun. Played at some games there that I've been waiting to play for a long time. I don't think there's anything that I'm looking forward to. I want No More Heroes to come out. I want the next Bayonetta to come out. I want the next Metroid Prime, but I think those are that's going to be 2021 if we're lucky. Okay, so the last question, I saved this one for last because I thought it would be the most interesting and perhaps the most introspective. But what made you want to move to Japan? So I think a lot of people who are probably watching this, I grew up in the 90s where I just had Japanese culture just bombarded at me, through the video games on the Super Nintendo and the N64. I watched Toonami and I watched all the anime. I eventually ended up getting into Japanese history and culture and music. And for the longest time, I'd always wanted to go to Japan. I always wanted to at least maybe even live in Japan for at least a short amount of time. But I'd kind of put that on the back burner because I didn't really think it was going to happen. And then I I graduated from college on the tail end of the financial crisis. So I was coming into a world that had been like employment opportunities had been absolutely obliterated in America. I had tried to get into graduate school and that hadn't exactly worked out. And so I was just like, I was looking at it. I had a liberal arts degree. Like it's amazing that I've been able to make a living out of that. But I was faced at this. I graduated in the early 2010s, and I was just looking at the situation. And I was like, man, it's probably going to be really difficult for me to get a job in the U.S. And so I looked abroad, and I first got a job teaching English in China. I taught there for a year. I didn't like living in China that much. So I was like, oh, maybe I can use this experience and I can go to Japan because I'd always wanted to go to Japan so I could, experience what it was living like in this culture that had given me so much. And so I applied for the JET program, got in, and then I ended up staying in Japan for 8 years. Yeah, I don't think there was ever really a time. I think when I first went to Japan, I thought like, yeah, maybe I'll stay here for a while. After that, after about the first 6 months, I was like, I'll go home eventually. It was always like every year. I'd say after the third year I was in Japan, every year had become my last year in Japan, but I stayed for one reason or another. And then it eventually just came the time for me to leave, and that's why I now have this crazy radiator. I can't believe this is actually what the heating system is in a first world developed country. But now this is where I live. Although I will be going back to America in a few months once my tourist visa runs out. But then hopefully should be coming back again after that. So yeah, that's the 6K Q&A. Hope I didn't ramble on too much. This is all of the questions that were left in the comments of the announcement video, along with the survey. Again, if you're watching this far into the video, thank you for having subscribed to this channel. Got to 6,000. Can't wait to get to 7,000 and beyond. Thanks to everyone who dropped a question into the survey, and extra thank you for answering the survey itself. That got some great data from it, really going to drive the direction of this channel. I saw people were really gunning for GameCube, Sega Saturn, and the Super Nintendo. Those are the systems I'm going to be focusing on, especially over the next couple of months. We've got a lot of Super Nintendo stuff coming up. Actually, just before this, I filmed a couple of retrospectives on some very expensive Super Famicom games, Rendering Ranger R2 and Magical Poppin'. Those will be coming up over the next couple weeks, along with more videos. Really excited. I'm going to be streaming. I'm going to be trying to stream on the weekends and a couple of odd weekdays I want to start at 7 p.m. British time. That'll be, I think, 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That'll be it's like 10 or 11 Pacific East Coast time for those in America. I'll have those scheduled anyways. Those will be coming up at a certain point. So that's the 6K Q&A. Again, thanks for everyone for submitting your questions, answering the survey, and thank you, of course, for watching. Your man out of Japan, Jay Contra. Thanks for watching. See you next time, and mahalo.